recorded. Can speakers please remember to use the microphone to help with the amplification in the room? Agenda item number 1, Diane, can we deal with apologies for absence?
Yes, thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Danny Myers, Mags Goderidge and Councillor Emily Knight, but we have Councillor Andrew Waller here substituting for Councillor Knight.
And I'm pleased there's no representation from the fire service, because I forgot to say I'm not expecting any fire test today. So if the alarm sounds, please proceed down the stairs, past the reception, out into the car park. I'll move on to agenda item number 2, declaration of interest. Members, I think there's a number of you want to declare an interest on the public question relates to plannings.
Yeah, I'm the chair of the Harrogate and Knaresborough Planning Committee and a sub on North Yorkshire Strategic, so we often discuss battery issues.
Chair, I'd like to declare I'm on the Richmond Area Planning Committee, so we've taken very little part. It's not pecuniary, but it's worth declaring. Thank you.
Heather?
Yes, likewise, I'm Vice Chair of Richmond Planning Committee. Thank you.
And David?
Yes, Chairman. I'm just a sub on Scarborough, but I think I better declare it.
Thank you, members, for your declaration of interest, which will be noted. Sorry, Steve.
It's all right, I'm a member of Selby Planning and a sub on Strategic.
Thank you, Steve. I will note all these declarations of interest in the minutes. Agenda item 3, consideration of exclusion of the public relating to the precept, which is item number 8. Can the panel agree that we retain the right to keep item 8 closed session on our agenda and to determine whether this is required after consideration of the police precept proposal item 7? Can I have a show of hands in agreement to that? Thank you, members. That's been approved. Agenda item 4, minutes of the panel meeting held on the 21st of January 2026. Are members happy that these minutes are signed as an accurate record? Show of hands. Thank you very much. Those are approved. Agenda item 5, public questions or statements of the panel. We received notice of 2 questions. The first was from Steve Galloway, who cannot be present today. Therefore, I don't propose taking that question. We've got a second question from Caroline Clayton. Caroline, would you like to read out your question using the microphone? Thank you.
Thank you for taking my question today. I'd like to ask for the panel's views on whether there is scope for the police and fire services to be statutory consultees and take a formal role in the planning process for solar farm developments in North Yorkshire, and what opportunities or challenges the panel sees in that approach. Solar farms bring new and very real safety considerations. These sites often span hundreds of acres and contain photovoltaic modules and with vegetation underneath, inverters, high voltage direct current cabling and associated electrical infrastructure. These present a tangible risk of electrical fault and fire. Remote installations can attract theft, vandalism and trespass. Good security design from the outset protects critical infrastructure and reduces risks to both the public and responding police officers. Early involvement from the police and fire services helps ensure sites are designed so crews can reach incidents quickly and operate safely. In some proposals, as an example being the proposed solar farm, Lords Lane, Bedale, planning reference ZB25/01246/full. There is an existing family home located in the centre of the proposed solar farm. This proposed site is also crisscrossed by public rights of way running north to south and east to west. that raises serious questions about evacuation routes and how incidents could affect other nearby residents too. Those risks must be properly assessed at the design stage, not after problems arise. The site is located in a rural setting with narrow lanes, narrow field entrances, soft verges, and with distance to hydrants. This could significantly impede the emergency services' ability to access the site quickly and deploy appropriate resources. In a fire scenario, solar panel arrays may also propagate flames across long rows of panels or trigger adjacent field fires, placing nearby residents and property at risk. In the event of fire involving PV modules, the release of toxic fumes from plastic resins, heavy metals, and chemicals is a recognised hazard. Further, firewater runoff may carry contaminants into soil and watercourses, potentially causing long-term environmental harm. Making emergency services statutory consultees does not delay renewable energy. It ensures it's delivered safely, responsibly, and with the protection of local communities at heart. In other areas of Yorkshire, examples being East Yorkshire and Doncaster councils, the police and fire are consultees in solar farm applications. To recap, I'd like to ask for the panel's views on whether there is scope for the police and fire services to be statutory consultees and take a formal role in the planning process for solar farm developments in North Yorkshire, and what opportunities or challenges the panel sees in that approach. Thank you.
Caroline, thank you very much for your question. This was a topic that we discussed with the Deputy Mayor last year, and I'm going to invite her to respond to your question. We need to keep this at a generic level. Number of colleagues on the panel, as you already noted, sit on planning committees, so we can't talk about the specific planning application, but we can talk about the principles of the planning department liaising with rescue services, including fire and rescue. Deputy Mayor, I'll pass across to you.
Thank you for the question, and also thank you for the advance notice of it. I sought guidance from the Chief Fire Officer about how we should best respond to the question. So I'm going to just read out some of his reply, if that's okay with you. But the Fire and Rescue Service recognises that the large-scale battery and energy storage systems and solar farm developments do introduce new emerging operational and environmental risks, which must be appropriately considered during the planning and design process. But at present, the Fire and Rescue Service is not a statutory planning consultee, and accordingly, York and North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service doesn't hold a formal decision-making role in planning applications, but the service does proactively engage with designers, developers and planning authorities and our other regulatory partners to promote best practice design in the interests of both public and firefighter safety. North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service's involvement currently, however, is advisory, impartial and delivered within the scope of the statutory responsibilities that it does have. The service does not determine planning outcomes, but provides operationally focused, risk-based guidance where consulted by local planning authorities, and it is up to those local planning authorities to inform the fire service where those planning applications are made. There is an exception where developments fall under the regime for nationally significant infrastructure projects, where the Fire and Rescue Service can be formally consulted as part of that statutory process. But there is clearly value in structured early engagement between developers and the Fire and Rescue Service, and across North Yorkshire and the City of York, early dialogue is actively encouraged prior to planning submissions and has, to my knowledge, been taking place in that way. The Fire and Rescue Service has created and operates an agreed engagement process with the local planning authorities to support that kind of collaborative discussion with developers and designers, and to ensure that emergency access, water supply and fire spread considerations, the site layout and energy storage risks are addressed at the earliest stage possible. This engagement opportunity is available pre-application to inform safe and resilient design and during live planning applications in coordination with the relevant planning authority. Following the commissioning of energy storage systems or solar farm sites. North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service undertakes site-specific risk information visits to identify hazards, inform operational risk databases, and develop tactical response plans to support firefighter safety and effective incident management. The position at present ensures that the Fire and Rescue Service is proportionate, consistent, and constructive in its engagement with the planning authorities, but upholds its separate fire-specific statutory duties and supports the safe development of energy infrastructure across the region. I should say, just in response to the remarks that you made, that all fires will release contaminants and pose risk to our firefighters. And it's really important that we get the balance right across the combined authority between carbon reduction and investment in sustainability, and also ensuring that the public and, of course, the firefighters are kept safe in any of those developments. If it's useful, we can provide that information to you in writing so that you can take it away as a written response as well. Sorry, can I just have something else? Sorry, apologies. I forgot, I meant to say at the beginning, I'm also very happy to respond to Mr. Galloway's questions in writing if the panel would like us to provide a written response to those questions, given that he's been unable to attend, unless those are issues that are covered during the road safety discussion of the paper later in the agenda.
Thank you for that offer, Deputy Mayor. I think we'll take you up on the offer in terms of the first question, and also to supply Caroline with a written response. Caroline, you've got the opportunity for a supplementary question if you would like.
Thank you. And to have the written response would be lovely and very useful to us. I guess the only other follow-on question from that would be, after you've given the advance advice, for example, through the planning process, is that then visible on the planning portal for members of the public to view?
I've never sat on the planning committee. So my understanding that all responses from highways and other bodies are shown on the portal, or the planning portal. I don't know if there's any North Yorkshire members who want to sit on the planning committee can confirm that is correct. You're not heavy, David. You're going to confirm.
I would just say that if the Deputy Mayor wishes it to be placed on the planning portal, it would be placed on the planning portal, but it would have to be directed to the planning department, a copy.
I think Caroline's question, David, was the response from the fire service, whether that would be shown on the portal.
It should be, yeah.
Yeah. Kevin?
Any responses come from any particular bodies are always in the papers, and I suggest if that's what you wanted, you could actually contact North Yorkshire Planning and ask them for a formal response from the fire service on that particular issue you have.
Members, thank you. Heather, did you want to add to that?
Why not just go to the parishes as well? So they generally raise their concerns. As an individual, you can do it as well, but obviously the parish was doing that. But the ones that we've been getting through latterly has been more strategic planning, which is not quite, it's the same thing, but I think over the rule, it's all of North Yorkshire then. Okay, but yeah, that's directly through your parish, or you can go onto the portal and ask for that. Thank you.
Caroline, does that clarify the position?
Yes, thank you for your help.
I've got Michael would like to speak, and then I've got Steve.
Thank you, Chair. In the declarations of interest, I thought that the reference was relating to a North Yorkshire planning matter, but as the questioner has raised a question for the panel, for full transparency, I am the executive or cabinet member responsible for planning in York. And although the police and fire are consulted, particularly fire, in those issues, they are not a statutory consultee unless, as the Deputy Mayor has said, it's a nationally significant infrastructure. Their comments would not necessarily be included in full because there is no actual, there is only guidelines around battery storage and solar voltaic, so it may not be recorded in full, other than we refer you to the national guidance.
Michael, you're right. This was specifically about a North Yorkshire planning application, but we will note your declaration of interest.
Thank you.
And thank you for your clarity.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, from a Selby planning point of view, everything that is submitted is on the planning portal. When it comes to the planning meeting, if fire service have made a recommendation or a suggestion or a comment, it'll be noted in the minutes of that. So you'll have fire service, no comment, police recommend whatever, environment agency. So an individual application, you'll be able to see who said what. It might be a condensed version, but you can then refer back to the portal for the full thing. So you might get 3 pages worth of gobbledygook which says no comment. So
Fraser, I think you will.
Thank you, Chair. It's to deal specifically with a question which says you would like to ask for the panel's views on whether there's scope for the police and fire services to be statutory consultees and to take a formal role, and to ask what challenges, what opportunities or challenges the panel sees. Obviously, I see the opportunity to develop a policy, but the challenge, particularly at this time of year when we're looking at finance, would be the cost implications of having both the police and the fire look at every single application that was to come if we were to become statutory consultees. And I wonder if that's something we would need to take a proper look at before we were to lobby to take more of an impact, more of a view on this, which deals directly with the question. I think the challenge around this would be the cost, the financial cost of us becoming statutory consultees on this would have to be taken under consideration.
Thank you. Just to add that additional clarification, yes, the challenges and implications of becoming a statutory consultee would include quite significant resource demands in terms of workloads for the fire and rescue service, given both the volume and complexity of some of those energy infrastructure applications, which would also need to ensure that we were avoiding duplication with other regulators in that area as well. But yeah, so there are other factors to consider, but at the moment we're not a statutory. The service is not a statutory consultee.
Thank you for your participation, Caroline. Thank you for your question and your attendance today. I propose moving on to agenda item 7, the MERS policing preset proposals. Members, that's on page 11 to 60 of your papers. 7A, panel scrutiny of the policing proposals, which is pages 11 to 14. Panel, we're just asked to note the guidance, unless there's any question from any members on that guidance. No. I'll move on to item 7. The policing preset proposals 2026-27, pages 15 to 60. Mer, we have read your proposals. Is there anything you would like to add by way of introductions?
Thank you, Chair. If I may just do a small introduction into the wider piece around, and actually just viewing some real positive news from North Yorkshire Police over the last 12 months as well, if I may. So you may all be aware that the police and crime plan priorities that the Deputy Mayor and I set out in the police fire plan focus on 4 key areas, which is the focus on prevention and early intervention work, the protect the public, work with partners and build those stronger communities. I think there's no better example of those 4 pieces of work coming together when the Deputy Mayor and I held an interfaith group meeting in York quite recently with representations from York and North Yorkshire religious groups. And we had 2 or 3 police officers present in that meeting, and the support that all the faith groups show to the police and the great working and relationships that they have built there, I think was a great testament to the on the ground work that our police force are doing right across York and North Yorkshire. And it was incredibly heartening to see that so many of our communities that have often feel, ignored or not heard really did feel like their voice had been heard. So a great testament to the police there. And also just 2 weeks ago, I was invited to Harrogate did the 81st anniversary of the annexation of Auschwitz and the work there, and I went over with Councillor Chris Audrey was there as well, and speaking to the Jewish community in that room, there was not far off an actually standing ovation and applause from the work of North Yorkshire Police and how well supported that the Jewish community felt at that time as well. So it was excellent to see, and again, two local police officers and members of the force were there all day and engaging with the community. So it's really great to see that work is going on. And I think often we overlook that kind of work and we sit here, we look at papers, but when you actually get to see the work on the ground, it is fantastic to see. Another great piece of work as well, and I won't steal the Chief's thunder too much, but I think to show that crime is down across our region and to see that 1,300 fewer victims of crime is a great testament to the work that North Yorkshire Police and partners have done over the last 12 months as well, particularly focus on shoplift down by 5.7%, vehicle offences down by 16.5%, theft from a person down by nearly 23%. These are great stats to see, and it's a testament to the work of the Chief and obviously all our police service right across the patch. So going into the wider work around the precept, the paper sets out the financial context of North Yorkshire Police and my recommendation of introducing a £15 increase for Band D properties in York and North Yorkshire, which would set the 26-27 male police and fire precept at £335.86 for a Band D property. Increasing a precept is not a decision that I make lightly, and we've just considered multiple factors in reaching the decision, like we did with the fire precept only a couple of weeks ago. And those three are the minimal possible burden on local taxpayers, having effective, well-managed public services that keep people safe and deliver value for money, and delivering on local public priorities for both services, including the improvement of safety on our roads. These principles, I feel, ensure a balance between effective police services and the pressure that many families are facing at this time. The public consultation, which I just want to thank all those who took part in that, and the team who actually administered the public consultation, found that 66% of respondents supported a precept of £14 and 47% supported a precept of £16. So the £15 proposal sits right in line with the public support on this matter as well. So in terms of the work that Joe and I have done in the wider as well, is making sure that we do have the funding settlement that is agreed and that can support this service going forward. Joe and I have written to the Home Secretary to express our ongoing support for the police, but also ongoing concerns around funding settlements for North Yorkshire Police, taking into the fact that things like the rurality and the size of our region. Obviously, we welcome the increase in police numbers that have been brought through, the 32 neighbourhood police officers and 20 PCSOs, which I believe are pretty much in train now to come in force as we speak. And I think a lot of those are already in place, which is fantastic to see. Also, other considerations we've taken into the precept is the value for money letter that I asked the Deputy Mayor to write to the Chief Constable, setting out and how we can deliver value for money in all that we do. The Chief Constable set out his view of the impact government and local funding will have on police service, and set out areas of savings, identifying around 4.7 million of savings, which is around 2% of the entire expenditure of the organisation. But as I say, we come back to the work that's already been happening, that big focus on protecting public services at the heart of all we do, and making sure that not just the people of our community, but our police officers and frontline workers are also safe as well. And a big focus that we'll always have on is the prevention and early intervention work. And just an example of some of that work we've been doing, the Community Fund, which last year supported 37 projects at almost £386,000. We've actually doubled that fund to be able to put more money through the Movement, Activity and Sport Fund. So again, the opportunity there where we can bring the wider combined authority and the work that we do in line with what the police and fire do, we can that joined up approach. So I think it's a testament to what the combined authorities do in the whole, rather than just looking at things in isolation. So while the Movement, Activity and Sport Fund is out there, we'll do a little plug. Any members or organisation or community groups or both local authorities who haven't applied to that, then please do. Round 2 will be going up until April, and obviously that focus on that preventative work and how we can support people right across the region. So I can hand over to Deputy Mayor, if you'd like to come in on any more of those points, Chair, but I'm happy from there. Thank you very much.
You pass a Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. The Mayor's been pretty comprehensive in those introductory remarks. So I suppose I'd just remind panel that we've already sought assurances based on the level of precept that we've proposed here. We've sought additional assurances both to the Home Secretary, as the Mayor just set out, but also the Chief Constable has sent us an extensive assurance letter, which I think we've asked to be placed with panel as well, so that you can see that around the efficiencies that are being driven within the North Yorkshire Police Service, and just the processes to ensure value for money for North Yorkshire taxpayers, that those systems are in place, and those are some of the systems that I monitor regularly through my oversight of the service. And then finally, and I'll ask the Chief Constable if he wants to also add anything, but I would just also add, it's been a very busy, in addition to precept, there's an awful lot going on in the policing landscape currently. The police reform white paper was published actually, I think it was only last week. It feels like it was ages ago. Last Monday, and will mean significant change for policing potentially in the months and years to come, and that I've already been making representations on behalf of North Yorkshire and the residents of North Yorkshire to ensure that both rural crime and the need for strong assurance and governance over policing is retained with any changes that the government are looking at. But in addition to the police reform white paper, we've also had the road safety strategy published at the start of the year, which I know we're going to look at in a bit more detail later on the agenda, and also the VORG strategy, which came out just before Christmas. So there is a lot going on in this world currently. Really, I think this is a minimal proposal to panel. We're trying to minimise the burden on council taxpayers while retaining the level of public services that we know people want to see in our region. I don't know whether you want to ask the Chief Constable if he's got anything else to add to that.
Chief Constable.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to come speak to the panel today.
Would you just move the microphone a bit?
I can do. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
So thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to the panel today, and thank you to the Mayor and Deputy Mayor, who I think have been very generous in the words about the work of the force. It would be right to say, I was very grateful last year for the extra investments in neighbourhood policing. Now, that takes time. We've been in the process of recruiting all those officers and staff, and indeed, only yesterday morning, or Tuesday morning, I was attesting 32 new police officers coming into the force. The full effect of that will take some years. When those officers are experienced, they'll be posted into neighbours. But by the time you get an experienced police officer, you're talking 2-3 years down the line. So whilst crime is improving, and as the Mayor said, when I sat here last year, I talked about there being 2,800 less crimes than the previous year. This year, it's down another 1,400 crimes. That's nearly a 9% reduction in crime since the 1st of April 2024. Our detection rate has continued to rise, and we continue to have one of the highest detection rates of any police force in the country. I've said it before and I'll say it again. My approach to policing is very much about a back to basics approach. It's about effective neighbourhood policing with purpose, where we have dedicated officers in communities that undertake problem solving. That's what contributes to that continuing reduction in crime. But also, we make North Yorkshire a hostile place for criminals to operate. So every month you'll see Operation Tornado as a real visible embodiment of what we do, getting out there, tackling crime and tackling criminals. The number of outstanding suspects across the course of the past year is reduced by 32%. As I say, our detection rate has now risen 4 percentage points over 2 years. It remains one of the highest in the country. It's now taken us 50 days less to reach the outcome of an investigation because we're dealing with it quicker. We've just had our HMIC inspection. The report won't be published until I think it's probably the middle of March. But I'm pretty confident what you'll see across every area is that the force has improved and moved on. Of course, it will identify some issues because there's never been an inspection in the history of HMIC that doesn't find somewhere where you can continue to improve. But that's fine, because my approach to policing is always one of continuous improvement. The investment in neighbourhood resources was welcome. There'll be a further investment in neighbourhood resources this year as part of the government's programme. I always stress the point, policing is more complex than neighbourhood policing, and you'll see through some of the investments we made now last year around our vulnerability assessment team, and we will continue to need to make investments in areas other than neighbourhood policing to make sure that we can meet head on and deal with the range of threats that we face across the county. But I'm very confident, as I say, that we are continuing to make the county safer. A 9% reduction in crime over 2 years. You look at things like burglary, theft from motor vehicle, shoplifting down this year. When I hear headlines in the media that crime is out of control, policing is broken, well, crime is not out of control here in North Yorkshire, and North Yorkshire Police most definitely isn't broken. There's a lot going on in the policing landscape, lots in the government white paper to absorb that will take place in the years ahead. My commitment is this: I won't get drawn into the politics of it because I never do. I'll be very clear though, I'm going to be an advocate for making sure that we maintain a level of policing that's commensurate with the size of the geography of North Yorkshire Police. Said it when I sat here in my confirmation hearing 2 years ago. Rurality is vulnerability in itself. If you live in a rural community and you're isolated, that brings an element of vulnerability to everyone who lives in those communities. I do know, having had a near 30-year career in policing and having worked in big metropolitan forces, that the way that you allocate resources in big metropolitan policing areas is different than you do here in North Yorkshire. And I will continue to advocate for rural policing and making sure that we keep our rural communities safe, whilst balancing our resources across Scarborough and Harrogate and York and everywhere else. So I won't say any more, but I think that the Mayor's adequately as we continue to drive down crime, continue to improve policing, continue to make the county a hostile area for criminals, and we're going to continue to do that over the year ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Chief Constable, for the introduction. Before I move to members' questions, I'd just like to acknowledge the briefing that we had with Michael Porter beforehand. Thank you very much for that. Members really value it, and it does assist us in discussing the precepts. So thank you, Michael. I have a number of members who want to ask a question. So I'm going to go to you first, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for the introductory comments to the paper. I think for most residents in the area, they see the outcome of their precept through neighbourhood policing and visible policing. And whilst there is a huge amount of other things that the police do, and the funds that are needed for that are tied in with the setting of the precept, my concern is that many of us around this chamber will face residents and businesses suffering from antisocial behaviour and criminality. In the last few days, I've met with a number in the patch that I represent, and they want to see neighbourhood policing happen in post and not in vacancies. And I appreciate the work that the Chief Constable has done to fill vacancies. I made representations on a local level, and I'm grateful that that's been answered. At the last meeting, we were told that there was a £900,000 shortfall in neighbourhood policing, and there's still a question over the £1 million hotspot patrol figure. I appreciate there's representation has been made, and it'd be grateful because I don't think the panel have received that sight of that letter. So what my question is we appreciate the priority that neighbourhood policing has. It's in overcoming those shortfalls in the system going forward, so that there isn't an impediment to the ambition that you've set out in terms of delivery of people on the ground.
I think you decided you're going to speak, Joe.
That wasn't actually what I was doing. Thanks for the question. There's a couple of observations that I would make. I don't know whether Michael has anything to say on the specific numbers part of your question. My understanding in terms of the direction of travel and the changes in the budget and what that means in terms of neighbourhood policing is one of the reasons why the government's shift into permanent neighbourhood policing and increasing neighbourhood policing teams specifically is in order to reduce a reliance on kind of temporary fixes like the hotspot patrol money, which has had an amazing impact. And I think we looked at the numbers in the last meeting. Although it has an amazing impact, actually we can have that amazing impact with permanent teams through the neighbourhood policing uplift. So the kind of accounting change, if you like, around shifting resource from temporary hotspot funding into permanent funding of full-time neighbourhood policing teams is about ensuring that you've got that resource permanently and you're not just uplifting in overtime bills and all the rest of it, which is where a lot of that hotspot policing money went. What I would say, I completely agree with Councillor Waller around people's experiences around antisocial behaviour in particular. It is incredibly important that people in our communities report crime and antisocial behaviour when it's happening. Certainly my own experience is that businesses really need to step into that space as well if they're experiencing retail crime or shoplifting or other antisocial behaviour as a business or as a school or as a public service, that they report that, because actually the police can only respond to information that they are being given. And I know that that some of that confidence dipped. I suppose what the message from the Chief Constable's remarks was that actually crime is coming down and actually people do need to have slightly more confidence in the policing response that they will be getting if they're reporting. And so therefore I would just encourage people to ensure that they are reporting in order that the police can respond and that we can get those increased neighbourhood resources out there where they need to be. I don't know whether anyone else wants to come in on anything.
I really support what the Mayor says in that, as the Chief Constable, I'd always rather rely on permanent staff than short-term funding. One, I've got a workforce that I've got to manage the welfare of, and if people are just working overtime to plug gaps, that takes a toll on the workforce in the long run. So, you know, the footprint of neighbourhood policing has increased during the course of this year. It will increase over the course of next year. But it takes time to recruit. You do not say, right, we're going to recruit 32 police officers, and then 6 months later you've got 32 fully functioning police officers there on the streets of York and North Yorkshire. That just doesn't happen. As I say, it takes a long time to train a police officer to be fully occupationally competent and then to gain experience on top of that to maximise their impact in communities. But we're on that journey now. So, you know, the residents of York and North Yorkshire will continue to see their neighbourhood teams improve and deliver more in the year and years ahead. It's also about local leadership. You know, we've made some changes to the leadership around neighbourhood policing across the course of this year. We have a stable of inspectors now who, in my view, are all absolutely brilliant. They're really focused on their local areas and in terms of how that they deploy those resources according to local need. But I reiterate, when you run an organisation like a police service, as I'm charged with doing, you need a plan. You know, I've been very clear about the plan, back to basics approach, preventing and detecting crime, managing offenders, making it a hostile place for criminals and protecting vulnerable people. You then need an operating model that is capable of delivering that plan. And you know, I absolutely operate where I know the public love neighbourhood policing, but there are complexities across this. But, you know, I need specialist safeguarding detectives to deal with people who are abusing children online. You know, I need firearms officers. I need people who can respond. I need specialist roads policing officers who can deal with some of the real challenges we have around road safety. We need all of that. And my job as the Chief Constable is to make sure that I balance resources across a whole range of risks. And our force management statement that we produce every year, that we're required to produce, is a really comprehensive understanding of the demand that we see facing North Yorkshire Police and the risk and the threats, our capacity and capability across that range of threats, and any gaps in that. And every year when I'm thinking about the budget and what I put to the Mayor, I'm thinking about demand, risk, threat and harm, and how I tweak, and I'll use the word tweak because our operating model, I believe, is very valid, and that's what's delivered the reduction in crime. But make sure that we balance those resources across a range of threats, and that's my job to worry about.
My question is bolted on to Councillor Waller's, and it was whether the changes to the budget would affect the neighbourhood policing grant and the growth of 17 full-time equivalents. You appear to have answered that question. What I will also add is that several months ago, the Chief Constable was kind enough to invite the panel to go and see him, and he talked with lovely warm words in terms of neighbourhood policing and that it would improve. And I've got to say this, that I've got my area, my ward is South Milford and Montfryston. I have 8 parish councils, and over the years I've serviced those councils. You very rarely see a police officer. I can tell you that within the last 3 months, 6 of my parish councils have had police officers there. And yesterday I was delighted to hear that the neighbourhood policing team that normally was 1 PC and 1 PCSO has been increased to 2 PCs and 3 PCSOs. So I've actually can tell this, the warm words have actually been translated into action. So I congratulate the Commissioner and the Chief for that. Thank you.
No, but if I may just come on one point, there is a difference, isn't there, between being safe and feeling safe. And I think often we can tell these stories, and the Chief Constable and I and Joe, we can go out there and say there is a reduction in crime and the numbers are down, numbers in the other direction. People also have to feel that safe as well. And coming from a retailer, I know there's been a big focus on retail crime recently, just the engagement with retailers and businesses to do that reporting, actually to show we are here listening, and then the feedback has been literally in the stats of that crime is coming down. So there is its numbers are coming down, and we can tell these stories and we can put out social media posts and comments about sorting them, but people do need to feel safe as well. And actually seeing police officers in our neighbourhoods does give that sense to people. But also when people are seeing the results of crimes are coming down as well, it does paint that solid picture that not only are people seeing them, the results are literally there in front of us as well to be able to tell.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting around perceptions, because I have perceptions as well as the Chief, and having worked in very different police forces in the past, one of the things I've noticed here, having just gone through my 2nd summer as the Chief Constable here last year, is I've never worked anywhere where the level of demand between the winter and the summer varies by such a gap in North Yorkshire, and some of that's fairly obvious why. A lot of tourism on the coast, a lot of tourism around the city. It's such a beautiful area. Lots of people flock here, and there is a challenge because you can't resource. If I was to say let's resource it to the demand we face in the summer months, we're probably coming back here asking for £100 precept increase, because you need, in the summertime, our resources are stretched very, very thinly. Normally in January, it's quite quiet. So, weather's poor, crime is down, the demand for services is down. And the challenge we have across all our functions is to try and smooth that out across the course of the year. So that perception issue is a real challenge. And I think particularly in the summer months when we've got demand, because we've got a lot more demand coming through the door, the demand in our response teams is much, much higher. They're going from job to job to job to job. Whereas at this time of year now, you will see them adding to the neighbourhood effort, doing more preventative stuff. So I'll just reiterate that point really. My job is to try and balance resources across a whole range of functions, and it's important that I continue to do that.
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you, Chair. And this is also a supplementary to Councillor Waller's original question. And it's, I suppose to some extent, I'm asking you, is neighbourhood policing something of a misnomer? Because you're never going to be able to have police officers in every neighbourhood, even if, as we've heard, police numbers in a neighbourhood increased by 1 PC and another PCSO. It's still not going to be sufficient. Surely the point that you made earlier is the more relevant one, is how are we detecting crime? Do we have enough detectives working, as well as trying to create this perception that perhaps you can never police your way out of an issue? And I suppose my question is how effective do you think neighbourhood policing is compared to increasing the amounts of detectives and those specialist officers?
Well, that's definitely a question for me, I think.
They're all pointing at you, Chief
They're
Constable.
all pointing at me. Well, where would I start with that? I'll take you back to the Peelian principles of policing and Robert Peel and the formation of the modern police. And if you think prior to the formation of the modern police service in 1823, the government used to deploy the army to quell insurrection in communities. When I speak to all my new recruits, I talk about policing in this country being different. We're not like the gendarmerie in France or the Carabinieri in Italy, which are effectively a quasi-military force that to control citizens. We police by consent. And that's why, largely, we still remain the only unarmed police service in the modern world. And Peel talked about the measure of success of a police force being the absence of crime, not what you do when it happens. So that's what drives me. I hold that principle of policing by consent very, very dear. It's driven me for 30 years as a police officer. And actually preventing crime in communities is what's important. And I just, I've seen police in so many different locations over the past 3 decades. I firmly believe that geographical, local ownership of policing is the way to prevent crime. It is difficult in an area like North Yorkshire. A neighbourhood in North Yorkshire is not like it is in part of Sheffield or part, a London borough. It is bigger. But that principle of having an inspector responsible for that area, who's responsible for the totality of what happens there, supported by a range of police officers and PCSOs, but they have to undertake what I call evidence-based problem solving. The idea that someone wandering around in a yellow coat will prevent crime, there's no evidence behind it. It definitely makes people feel safer. That I absolutely grant you. But the evidence is you have to think about crime problems in partnership with the community, in partnership with local businesses, in partnership with the local authority, and think about how do you actually tackle the causes of that. And we've got some really good examples of that. If you look what's happened on the Clifton Estate in York around the Clearhole build, what's happening at Barracliff, at Scarborough, and there are many other examples around the county where you've got that neighbourhood policing team working with partners from the local authority, housing, local businesses, local residents, and really trying to solve the problems. That's what delivers effective community safety. And we're going to continue that. That's what I call neighbourhood policing with purpose. You recall when I sat here 2 years ago, I talked about the importance of neighbourhood policing with purpose. So we'll continue to do that. That said, and not all I said, just deal with your latter point is, I talk about a back to basics approach to policing. And that means if you, particularly with travelling criminality that comes in, if you come into North Yorkshire and you commit crime, we make sure that we're onto you. And that's why our arrest rate has increased. The speed at we investigate crime has increased. Our detection rate continues to climb. And it's really important when I talk about balancing those resources that, one, I have enough detectives, but two, things like our road policing teams that are there in the middle of the night, dealing with cross-border criminals coming in from the north and south of the county. Our ANPR infrastructure that means that we can act in a more intelligent way. That's all, from a policing perspective, equally important. Now, very often the public don't see that, but that's what drives down crime. It contributes to a complex effort, and it's all equally important. But the point being is it's prevention first. It is prevention first, always. But actually, in my experience, if you've got someone who's a prolific burglar and you get them arrested and put them in the justice system, that contributes to reducing crime as well.
And Chair, if I may just bring into that as well, which is why a big focus of always has been on that prevention and early intervention work, which again comes back to one of the examples that we raised earlier on about the community fund, that we've doubled the investment into that, with that focus on that preventative work, working with partners, not just North Yorkshire Police, but those communities and those partners who know their areas, they know their people, and we can have that really bespoke focus in that work as well. Because as I say, it's all well and good being at the brass end of it where we are doing the arresting of people, but the more focus we kind of have on that preventative work and actually stop crime happening in the first place is surely one of the best ways. But yes, we're always going to need that point where someone will need to be nicked, absolutely. But the more we can do on that preventative work and stop that cycle of the next generation falling into the next generation of that cycle, at some point we've got to start drawing lines in the sand, stopping that, and actually having that preventative focus, which is why I believe we're in the state we are in, where these numbers are coming down.
David?
Thank you, Chairman. I've got to say I commend the proposal to increase neighbourhood policing. I come from the old school where I can remember when we had the village bobby, living in the community and riding his motorbike around regularly. And we didn't seem to have the problems we have now. In my area, we're blighted by cross-border crime. I'm right at the north, bordering on Redcar and Cleveland. And I do have serious concerns about the neighbourhoods and how they're policed. I also have concerns, particularly looking at the papers we've got in front of us, that government at one point proposed an increase in staffing and then the next year withdrew it. And I am concerned that there is some suggestion that to balance budgets, you might need to lose about 21 officers. My concern revolves around whether or not your proposals are going to be for PCSOs in the community and we lose warranted officers, and that really concerns me. The PCSOs do a wonderful job, but they do not have the same authority as a warranted officer. And I would ask that if you can clarify that for me.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks for the question. I'm sure the Chief Constable will come in on the operational detail, but I think the picture of where policing is at across the piece is complex, as I think the Chief set out then. But I think one of the things that probably has changed certainly over the last 20 or 30 years is the amount of hidden harm that policing is now having to be alive to, that perhaps was there when you had the bobby on the beat, but actually just wasn't being exposed, and people just weren't aware that it was taking place. Probably, in communities right across our region, it wasn't being reported. People were living as victims without reporting crimes to the police, often for many decades. And actually, a lot of that change has come to light in the last 20 years. The other big change that I think the police have to grapple with now is cyber crime and online fraud, which is probably more likely to affect a lot of our older residents and communities across our region than other kind of traditional crimes, if you like. So I think the challenge that the Chief Constable is kind of grappling with operationally is that you of course need that public confidence from the neighbourhood policing teams, and we've got those uplifts in policing going on, but you've also need the expertise in the police force to be able to deal with cyber and fraud, which that might not be expertise that comes from a police officer. That might be expertise that you bring in from other people in business and in the community, or it might be about safeguarding and actually making sure that kind of those other hidden harms in our communities are also being properly exposed and victims are being looked after in those spaces as well. So I think is the changing picture that police forces, not just in North Yorkshire but across the country, are dealing with, and actually is one of the things that the police reform white paper is looking at, is the changing nature of crime and demand that police forces are dealing with, and we just need to make sure that any of those changes are going to work for us here.
Chief Constable. Chief Constable, speak first.
Funny enough, you're not the first person that's talked to me about how policing used to be. I get that quite a lot. and good reason, because it is about people feeling safe in their communities. Policing has changed an awful lot, and as the Deputy Mayor said, the online element of it. I still recall being a young trainee detective in a CID office in 1998, and all of a sudden I used to go on the crime box every day, and there was an online banking fraud, and I can remember us looking at each other saying, "Who's investigated one of these before?" And here we are now, some 28 years on, and I forget the figures. It's something about 60% of crime that we deal with has some form of online element, and that does need a different set of skills. Sometimes that doesn't need to come with a warrant card. One of the frustrations we have, and I know certainly at on behalf of the National Police Chiefs Council, Gavin Stevens, who's the chair of the NPCC, one of the cases he's made on behalf of all of us is there is an obsession. There's always an obsession with the number of police officers that we've got. And actually policing today requires a whole range of different skills. And we just need to start thinking about it in a different way. And I'll just give you an example is, when I talked about demand coming into the force, our online child abuse team, that deals with indecent images of children. The spike in demand, because at a national level, we're getting far better at detecting that and identifying who's downloading these images and things like that. The amount of work that comes into the force has increased significantly. So I need more people doing that sort of work. Public never see it, never ever see it. These are people who are potentially committing horrendous offences against children. We've got to deal with that. But it's not just that. Then I need more people dealing with digital forensics. Now, you don't need to be a police officer to be a digital forensics examiner, and indeed, the best ones aren't police officers because you need a particular skill set and a particular mindset to do that. But then, as those people go into the criminal justice system, well, that will lead with more people on the sex offenders register. So I need more people working in that area. So the challenge I always have is I've got to make sure that the force adapts. We understand our demand. We understand what's increasing, what is decreasing. And we continue to make sure that we've got the broad range of skills to meet the threats, not only today, but I would make some really reasoned assumptions on what's it going to be in 3 years' time, what is it going to be in 5 years' time, so we can build that capacity and capability to make sure that we don't have any acute gaps in the future. So it's a complex picture, and none of this denigrates in any way my commitment to neighbourhood policing. It's really important because it reduces those crimes that actually impact on people's perceptions of safety. But I've got to be able to manage the broader range of threats.
Yeah. David, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the one thing, and that really is, I would like some assurance that we're not going to lose warranted officers and gain PCSOs in their place.
I can say so. What we've given a commitment to our numbers last year that we're going to rise by 32 police officers and 20 PCSOs. The number of officers in neighbourhoods will be rising by 17 across the course of this year, across the course of the next financial year. I certainly, at the moment, that is locked in by government, in so much as the central government funding is ring fenced around that with the neighbourhood policing grant, so that won't change. The challenge I always have, that's the situation over the next 12 months. The challenge I always have is that, and again, certainly as chiefs, we have expressed a really strong view around this, is by continuing to give us 12-month settlements as opposed to a 3-year settlement. I just don't know where it'll be in 12 months' time. So I'd love to give you a guarantee that nothing's ever going to change. But the bottom line is, all I can do is tell you how it's going to be over the next 12 months. Beyond that, we'll have to see.
Steve?
Thanks. Two things. Well, first thing is housekeeping. Is that the only camera we're using? Because there's members who are using their things for other things than the meeting, and if we have the usual camera there, then it's online. Not that they're doing anything naughty, because I'm looking over the shoulders, but we usually tell members not to do it. This is the bit for budget bit, isn't it? Because the first hour seems to be quite loving and how fantastically wonderful everything is, and nothing to do with the money. So we are on that bit, are we? Good. Thank you. The just the rationale behind the use of the reduction in the pension contribution. Could you give us a bit more information on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the assessment of the pension contribution is done by North Yorkshire's pension company, and we're provided with a 3-year indication of what our contributions as an employer needs to be into that contribution rate for the next 3 years. The report says it's gone down significantly this year from 9.5% down to 2.9%. So, I mean, I'm not an actuary, but I can tell you it's not going to stay at 2.9% forever, unfortunately. And so therefore what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that we don't spend all of that money and then in 3 years' time when we get a new number, it goes back up to 9.5% and we can't afford it. So what we're going to do is take the opportunity to invest that, put that money into our major capital program so that we can fund things without borrowing in the future. And then in 3 years' time, if we get a revised actuarial review that says it needs to go back to 9.5%, we won't have to cut the workforce or cut anything within the organisation. We'll be able to not put the money into our capital programme and we'll put it back into our revenue programme to be able to afford that contributions.
Kevin?
It's a bit what David was saying, actually, Chief Constable. I must admit, very impressed with your introduction and actually what you've done since I've seen in my areas. But what I will say is we had these fantastic things. It's really quite concerning that it seems to be give with one hand, take away with the other. So I just want to voice my concerns about these 21 police officers reduction. I'd like to, although I can see what the rationales are with all the spendings, I just really want to bring that's a real concern to everybody. And you mentioned people feeling safe. I think that hurts police force by reducing police, and that'll be, we've already seen, we know what the media is like and focusing negative, but that's what's coming out of this, and it's a real challenge. But I think you've done a great job since you've been here, and it's just really disappointing to see that reduction in police, because that feeling safe's a big thing, and when you're reducing police force, it means people are feeling safe. So it's a massive contribution. But and again, I agree with David about the balance is right between PCSOs and police officers. I seem to think the public's perception, you mentioned perception quite rightly so, of PCSOs they have to be in bed by 10 o'clock. They can't do that much. So losing police officers is a real concern in this. I understand you've got to run a budget to this, understand all the speedings, but I think it should be the last thing to do rather than one of the earlier things to do. I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks for the question. And yeah, you are right. I mean, it's about how people perceive it as much as anything else. So we do have a good story to tell in terms of crime is coming down and everything else. We've got 1,300 less victims of crime this last year, and as the chief has touched on as well, the landscape of policing has changed drastically, and actually having police officers and teams and individuals in other areas away from neighbourhood policing is equally as important as having police officers in our streets as well. Joe and I have also written to the government as well to express our concerns around funding, and as it's been touched on by the chief as well, the flux particular in terms of the population increase that we see in our season, particularly in the height of the summer. I can't remember the exact figure, but we estimate, you're talking tens of millions of increase into people who come into our region across the summer, that not only put strain on the police, but on our fire and rescue services as well. So these are regular engagements and conversations we are having with government to make sure that funding does take into consideration those kind of fluxes that we see, because it certainly does put a strain not only on our local residents, but of our visitors as well. So, but again, I'm just going back to the chief's point, being able to, he has to almost spin many plates and making sure that the force is fit for purpose all year round, but also does meet these growing and new demands that are away from necessarily a traditional neighbourhood police walking on our streets. So, thanks.
Couple of points. I hear what you say around PCSOs, but I can't let it go without making a point. Is we've got some brilliant PCSOs, and they do a different role than police officers, but they are brilliant. And you know, they are an essential part of what we do. They have their place in our communities, and I travel around the force a lot. So I think in the 4 days prior to Christmas Day, I did 850 miles. I got around to virtually every police station in the force, and I met some of our PCSs, particularly in some of our remote areas. There's nothing that happens in these areas that they don't know about. They're brilliant. They're part of the community, and their understanding of what goes on, and they're a really key part. So I just wanted to say that because I wouldn't want anyone to have any impression that I value PCSOs less than I do police officers, because I don't. They're an essential part of my team, and they're an essential part of the community. As regards losing police numbers, I agree with you. It's not a headline that I particularly want. It's not my job. The setting of the budget for policing and what resources I have at my disposal is a decision for others. I don't get involved in the politics of it all. I never have, and I never will. My job is, when I know exactly what my budget is, I will do my utmost to make sure that I deliver the very best police service that I can with that construct. And that number of 21, it's just setting out. That's the reality of where we are. But it is a worst case scenario. One of the things I did when I became the chief constable nearly 2 years ago was set up a savings and efficiency board that is chaired by my deputy chief constable, that is constantly looking about how can we do things differently, how can we do it more efficiently, and looking at not just to make savings to make the books balance. It's about looking for savings where we can invest. So when I'm talking about those new areas and emerging areas of demand, where do we generate the capital and the revenue from within to invest in those? So I'm not just constantly coming back to yourselves and saying, right, or to the mayor, saying, can we raise the precept again for this? So that will continue. We're introducing priority-based budgeting across a range of areas this year to try and have a look at how can we do things differently, what might demand might be. Because in some areas, demand is going down. And we've got to think about how do we then move resources around, and what I want for the force more generally is it for it to continue to be more proactive. Neighbourhood policing is proactive policing. It sits at the heart of it. Many of our teams support that in terms of proactive policing, and what I want to do is to make sure that I have got the maximum amount of resources in proactive policing, being out there preventing crime and making sure that the reactive side of the business is as lean as it can be and just about meets demand, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I just wanted to add one further bit of context, if that's helpful. Just based on the government kind of program in this area. So a lot of the changes around investment in policing in terms of neighbourhood policing and the neighbourhood policing guarantee, but also the wider police reform piece, are being funded through a police efficiencies program, which is only kind of 12 months in. And I'm sitting on the police efficiencies board with the Home Office nationally with one other PCC from another part of the country. And, those savings are coming through, but they're coming through probably at a slightly slower pace than had been anticipated. Don't these things always take slightly longer than people think they're going to at the beginning? But just wanted to share one tangible example in North Yorkshire, which I actually shared with the National Police Efficiencies Board yesterday, because I thought those poor civil servants in the Home Office probably never get any good news, which is that the change that they have made around the supply of software licenses just for us in North Yorkshire. So the kind of efficiency around software licensing, that obviously every police force in the country buys those software licenses for their IT systems. Already, just that small change for us in North Yorkshire is the equivalent to one police officer. So it's just to kind of demonstrate that those changes are coming, but they are coming probably at a slightly slower pace than perhaps we'd envisaged. And actually, hopefully, that if that pace of change increases next year, that will mean that some of those kind of pressures that we've got this year will alleviate. And then just second, just the point that David and I, the Mayor and I, made in our letter to the Home Secretary was that we're really keen that whatever neighbourhood policing looks like, it works for a place like York and North Yorkshire. We need neighbourhood policing that works for our patch here and not just a neighbourhood policing model that works for big cities and big urban areas. So in particular, our public safety officers, who we don't have very many of at the moment, they are currently not counted in our neighbourhood policing count that we have to report into the Home Office. So we're asking that both that and some of our rural crime task force that we know does brilliant work, but actually that is effectively neighbourhood policing into our farms and rural communities. We need those numbers to count in the neighbourhood policing maths that the Home Office does. And we need that to happen alongside that efficiencies programme nationally. But the Mayor and I are absolutely banging the drum for that nationally with the government to make sure that we get the best possible outcomes, both in terms of that efficiencies programme, but also in terms of making sure that what they're counting as neighbourhood policing works for us here.
It's very brief. I just want to make it clear. I'm not having a go at PCSOs. I was talking about the balance. So I don't want to be misquoted like Kevin's, anti-PCS. Not the case. I was talking about balance. And I actually said at the start, I'm worried about the great work that's been done cutting back, because I think it's been great from my area, what I've seen. So I'm supportive, but just concerns. Thank you, Chair.
Fraser?
Thanks. Following Steve's theme, it's also on finance. The inflation is currently running at 3.4%, and the projection that we got for the North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service pay award was at 3.5%. So the rationale to have a pay award here at 3% for this year, 2.5% for next year, and 2% in 28-29 seems really quite ambitious. I'm worried about the impact on the numbers going forward if that projection is out by 1%, 2%, particularly when you look at things like probation in prisons, which were often linked to being a 4% award this year. So I'm concerned, and I just want a rationale around why that 3% figure was picked.
I'm only going to go first because I anticipated your question, Fraser. So all I'll say in introduction, and then I'll ask Michael to come in on the specifics, is that I asked exactly that question because I thought that you would ask it, because I think the inflation in policing does work slightly differently to the wider kind of countrywide level of inflation, partly because of the grading structure within policing that means that you've got to factor in where police officers are in their grading system, and that affects where they're going to be in the future years in terms of inflation. But I'll let Michael come in on the specifics because I did think this might come up.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. So a couple of things that we took into account and why we've got different assumptions is one is in relation to timing. So the pay awards for police officers and police staff comes in from the 1st of September, and therefore we are expecting inflation to get lower as the year goes on, and also a reflection of the fact that last year, because of the timing of it, police officers and staff got a 4.2% pay award last year, where others, such as the fire service, got a 3.2%. So it's that playing through. That's not to say that this isn't by far and away the biggest area of risk for us in terms of the finances of the organisation. It is something that we're really mindful of. We have tested it nationally with every other police force area in the country, and everybody is forecasting 3%. And what we've seen over probably the last 5 years is where the pay award has been higher than that national assumption, that the Home Office has funded some of that difference, if not all of that difference. So we think we've got a reasonable assumption for those factors. If we're wrong, we also hold a pay and price reserve that would help support that in the current financial year or next financial year, and then we'd have to adjust thereafter. But it is, given how we spend money within policing, it is by far and away the biggest risk, given that we spend about 70%, 80% of our money on staffing.
Thank you. My question is really back on budgets again, and it's concerning the neighbourhood policing grant. And obviously that's very much dependent, that ring fence budget, on the delivery of 17 new police officers on the ground there. So the question is really about the level of risk of not recruiting those and that funding being at risk, and what you're doing to perhaps mitigate those risks.
So you're absolutely right. It is a risk, but it's one that we have a strategic workforce planning group at work that puts an awful lot of governance around this. And it will be factored into our growth plans, because it's not just recruiting 17 more, because there will be a proportion of people that will retire over the course of the next 12 months. Over the course of the past 12 months, I think off the top of my head, I think it's 155 police officers recruited over the course of the last year, to grow by 32 and replace those that have left. So it all gets factored in, it gets monitored monthly, there is governance around it, it gets a lot of scrutiny, including at my chief officer team meeting, and we will deliver it. I can tell you that we will deliver it. Some of those posts as well will come from elsewhere in the organisation. They won't all be new, all be new posts. Some of them will be new police officers. Some of them will come from elsewhere in the organisation. But we will make that target. I'm confident of it.
Great, thank you very much.
Chris?
Thanks, Chair. Actually, this isn't my question. It's from Mags Goodrich, who can't be with us today, and you'll be surprised to hear it's directed at the Deputy Mayor. It's about victim services on page 22 of the report. So Mags says that sorry, I can speak nearer to the microphone. So Mags says, I'll turn my button up, Tim. Max says that it's great news that the Ministry of Justice funding is confirmed for victim services for this year and next year. She wants to know, has this good news been shared with Commission services? Victim services are mainly delivered by charities who might benefit, but would benefit, I think, from this confirmation in order to plan effectively, especially as it's a 2-year settlement, of course.
My understanding is that we would have passed that information on. I'm slightly concerned that if she's asking the question, maybe that means she hasn't received an email. As someone who is delivering a commission service, generally speaking, anytime we get that kind of confirmation from the Ministry of Justice, we will be passing that on to our commission services, but I will check and I will let her know.
Lovely. I think she probably wouldn't have asked the question if she hadn't, so that's good. Good detective work.
Members, I think, unless there's anybody else with any further questions, I think we've had all the members' questions. Thank you. Can I have agreement from members that we don't need to go into private session? Right, thank you very much. Is it members' views that the panel recommend that the Mayor's proposal for policing prep be approved? Can I have a show of hands, subject to us preparing our statutory report to the Mayor with recommendations? On agreement? Thank you very much. Mayor, if you want to depart at this point, I didn't deliver in an hour, but you're very happy if you want to leave now. Super. Thank you very much.
I'm having a great time, Chair.
Thank you. In that case, I will go back to item agenda 6, members' questions. Do any members have questions? Yes, Michael.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions on 2 completely different topics. Do you want me to ask them both, or ask one and then come back later? Cool. I'll start then with a question about police's role, Deputy Mayor, in safeguarding of children. I've noticed the press comments about police overreach, which I found somewhat surprising. But I'd just like to know what what the instructions for police officers are in respect of child protection and safeguarding.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I also have seen the kind of media reporting around this, but I also had a letter from one of our members of parliament about 10 days ago, and have responded to ensure that the MP is aware of our complaints process, and that the member of the public who is affected, if they had any concerns about how the police had responded to a particular incident, that they make use of that complaints process. That's what it's there for. It's there to ensure that the public have a means of raising concerns if they're unhappy about the way in which a police officer has responded. I've also spoken to some of our local authority colleagues, officer colleagues, in terms of the safeguarding teams, just to seek assurance, because that was my instinct as well, which was that my understanding is that safeguarding should be everyone's responsibility. Certainly all the lessons from all the public inquiries that I've been aware of are that actually the mistakes and the errors and the failures that have taken place historically have taken place when institutions and agencies weren't taking and everyone's responsibility to safeguarding, and actually were ignoring signs and warning signs in their interactions with people. And actually, if there is any agency who may feel that there is any reason why they shouldn't be raising a concern, that would be a concern to me. If we had people thinking in our community that they shouldn't be raising safeguarding concerns because a political figure in particular might come down and criticise them for it, I think that is a deeply, deeply dangerous place to be. We need all our public servants to feel that they can report safeguarding concerns if they have them, and that will be then investigated in the proper way by the professionals in the safeguarding world. But we can't be wanting to take risks with the consequences of that, because all of those lessons are really starkly in the public domain already, and we should be ensuring that our public services and our police officers or our social workers or our firefighters or whoever it might be who might be making one of those social safeguarding referrals can do so without fear of comeback from either a political figure or anybody else for that matter. You should be able to just make those referrals and allow the professionals to respond appropriately. I don't know the details of the particular case, because that's not my role to understand the role that those particular operational details are matters for the police service or whichever agency was making a referral. But I do think that it is really important that people in all of our public services take their safeguarding responsibility seriously and make referrals whenever they have concerns, and that those are then investigated appropriately. And that's really all I've got to say on that.
Supplementary or second question?
No, it's a supplementary. Yeah, I'm not interested in any specific cases. It's just I'm really concerned that we give a message publicly that the police's job, in the same way as social services and children's services and housing workers and everybody else, if they have concerns about a child's welfare, is that it is their responsibility to report that to the right agencies.
I mean, we've just had a conversation about the precept and the budget for the police service, and the fact that the police service has to respond to all harm in our communities, whether it's hidden harm or some kind of very visible antisocial behaviour in a community. And that is a complex picture, but absolutely it is the job of not only the police service, but every public service to be taking the safeguarding of particularly children and any other vulnerable residents as seriously as they would a member of their own family. And therefore, I would absolutely urge anyone to report any safeguarding concerns using the measures that they should, and that all of our public services should feel that they can then make those referrals or pick up those referrals without any fear of comeback from anybody. Thank you.
Michael, do you want to ask your second question now?
Yeah, the second one is on a completely different topic. It's kind of partly in reference to something that the chief mentioned earlier, which was about taking a problem solving, a society-wide problem solving approach to crime. And it's in respect of AMPR and retail crime in particular. And one of the questions is, have we done any work, have you done any work, or have we done any work about tapping into those AMPR systems that are operated by private companies in major retail units, shopping parks, supermarkets, etc.? Because it kind of makes sense that if we have got suspicious vehicles that are maybe coming from cross-border, that they can be identified as quickly as possible, and that it be linked in with the police control room. Sorry, that was a really long-winded question, but I think they get the gist.
It's so unlike Councillor Pavlovic. Yes, thank you for the question. I haven't got a huge amount to say in response, not least because the Chief Constable is the national lead on AMPR, so probably has infinitely more expertise to add as an answer. The only thing I would say is that there was the force led a retail crime symposium about a year ago now, focused on retail crime and how we can use or better use technology in addressing retail crime in particular. One of the discussions that I recall was around what partnerships we need with our retail parks and the businesses and the private companies that run those camera systems in those car parks to make sure that we are joining those things together. There is another one of those planned for a couple of months' time. I think it might be in April, but I haven't really got anything else to add to that, not least because the mayor is the retailer with the expertise in retail crime, and the Chief Constable is the national lead on AMPR. So I might bring the mayor in first, and then I'll let the chief come in on AMPR specifically.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy. And just on the wider retail thing, I think it comes back to one of the pieces we raised earlier on about that confidence and making sure people are reporting them. I know a lot of particularly small business owners, myself included, we would often not report things because it's seen as a small petty thing that maybe something of lower value has been stolen, but actually what that leads into could be a much greater piece. And obviously if we're not reporting, the chief doesn't have the data, therefore we can't, align our services and our support to that equivalent areas. And obviously, but then the larger retailers do have a duty in this role as well. A lot of the time, for example, is how big a business, for example, are presenting their stores, just makes it rife for things to be stolen. Having loads of your high value alcohol at the front door as an advertising campaign, a lot of those bigger retailers will just write that off as cost. But actually what that leads to in that, it's a knock-on effect of those crimes. So first and foremost, yes, we've had the retail symposium last year. I believe there's one this year. That big focus on retail crime, I think, is why you've seen those numbers coming down. But again, that confidence in particularly small retailers to making sure that they are reporting and they know they're going to get a response and subsequent is a part of that bigger picture as well. But I'll let the chief come on the AMPR, since he's the expert on the matter.
I always worry when anyone calls me an expert on anything, but I have for the last 12 months been the. You'll be aware, police chiefs up and down the country, we all lead on various national policing issues, and my portfolio is automatic number plate recognition. I think the first thing I say is operation. I'd never talk about where we have cameras, where we don't have cameras, for fairly obvious reasons. So I wouldn't talk about specifics. But you're right in so much as there is a public AMPR network that it feeds the national ANPR system that's a Home Office funded system. That, I think off the top of my head, it does about 60 million reads a day up and down the country. There's obviously an ever expanding private ANPR network as well. Now, we're not routinely piped into that. One of the things that I am responsible for not only is about the integrity of the data within the ANPR database, which is obviously, as you can imagine, with something of that volume is a considerable responsibility, but making sure that that is protected in terms of the data, that it's effectively weeded, because you can't have people's movements on all the time, and access to that database is strictly controlled. And part of my role as the national lead, I work with the surveillance commissioners, work with the information commissioner's office to make sure that we are striking the right balance between using what is a very important investigative tool, but actually balancing to get that against people's civil liberties. And it's for that reason the public ANPR network, there's standards around cameras, around the data, about who has access to it, the security. They don't necessarily apply to private operators. It's governed completely differently. So it's something that in the future we will be exploring. It is something that on a one-off basis, if we're trying to do a particular operation, we can do it, but it's not routine at the moment.
Thank you for that. Move on to agenda item 9, road safety progress in York and North Yorkshire. Members 61 to 66 of your papers. Thank you for the update on road safety. It's been some time since the panel has taken a report on this. Although we know it's a partnership responsibility, it is a key priority within the Mayor's plans. And so it's important that the panel is able to get assurances on progress made, and in particular how police and fire are held to account for their role in this. We've read the papers in full. Is there anything you would like to add, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, before I open to members' questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair, if I may. So I think we can all agree that in terms of there's been some good progress with the road safety partnership, particularly around the education piece. I've seen a lot of their work firsthand, particularly their presence at the Yorkshire show that we see every year, and the engagement with younger people and our farming community as well, and particularly our younger, newer drivers as well. But certainly I think now is the time to go much further and put the partnership particularly on a stable financial footing. We must have a really strategic process. Obviously, we welcome the new national strategy for road safety that was published earlier this year. A renewed focus will be for us on delivering Vision Zero. I think we can all agree that one death on our roads is far, far too many, and unfortunately, we do see quite a lot on our roads, particularly of our younger drivers as well. And obviously how we get to there is looking at improvements in around reducing the risk from speed and looking to installing fixed and average speed cameras. Too many communities that I speak to, and I know Deputy Mayors, when we speak to parish councils and communities across the patches, is they do see this as a real danger, and they do want to see a real focus on this. I think we sometimes see our roads, particularly in the height of the summer, and again coming back to the Chief's words earlier on about how the increase in certain challenges that we face are heightened in our summer season. Again, this is what we see with a lot more people on our roads, and quite often using our roads as a racetrack. Quite honestly, we are only one of three counties in the UK that has absolutely no speed cameras, where you compare to West Yorkshire, which have over 450 fixed cameras, and I firmly believe this is a completely untenable position to be in. I'm very passionate about making sure that our streets are safe for everyone who uses them, our road users, our walkers, our wheelers, our cyclists, and obviously those in our car as well. And we can sit here and say warm words about how we want to do this, but actually we have to be really proactive in this space. I think we can. I'm sure many of us have experienced or know someone second or third hand who has been, involved in a serious collision on our roads. I know I have on 2 separate occasions, and the impact it has on those people, on those families, on those friends, on those communities. but also actually our frontline services who happen to go often to these incidents, our fire and rescue service, who obviously will attend incidents of any serious magnitude on a regular basis. So it's a blight that we really have, and it's something that we really need to take seriously and really to make sure our roads are safe for everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Just completely, obviously supporting both the paper and the direction of travel, pardon the pun, from the Mayor on the need to focus on road safety. We had our first regional road safety conference on Monday this week, and the national strategy on road safety was published at the start of the year, as the Mayor said. I really want to see the targets from the national strategy aligned for us regionally. So the national targets are for a 65% reduction in the number of people killed or seriously injured by 2035. So for us in North Yorkshire, that would mean 250 fewer people being killed or seriously injured every single year. And for children, the national target is higher. So the aim is for a 70% reduction in the number of children killed or seriously injured on our roads. And for us in York and North Yorkshire, in terms of our numbers, that would mean 2/3 of a primary school class of children every single year not being killed or seriously injured on our roads. And those statistics are real. And every single one of those statistics is a complete tragedy for the family, and for the emergency services who have to respond, and for the community in which it takes place. And I certainly know from the conversations I've had, actually the number in the paper is wrong. I think I've definitely met with more than 32 town and parish councils. I think it's closer to 60 of the 800 town and parish councils in York and North Yorkshire. But all of those parish council meetings and town council meetings, their one common theme is that they want their roads to be safer for their communities. And the Mayor and I are absolutely aligned in working with our emergency services, the police and the fire service and highways and the 2 local authorities to ensure that we do that. I have, in addition to the conference this week, I've also started meeting regularly with the cabinet and executive members from the 2 local authorities to ensure that we're strengthening that partnership working and our understanding of the issues in both areas. Those meetings will now take place regularly, and we're also just trying to make sure that we are looking at how we can bring forward a capital pot to use for road safety improvements for our region, because we know that we aren't going to get to that government target of 65% of people killed or seriously injured, a reduction of 65% by 2035. We're not going to get there without doing something. So we're going to have to look at our camera network, and we're going to have to look at other engineering improvements that we need in the region, as well as other work with partners on their statutory areas of responsibility.
I think it was 54 people were killed on the roads last year in North Yorkshire. And over the past 10 years, 390 people have lost their lives on the roads of North Yorkshire, which is a staggering number. It is an absolute, and behind every single person is a family that's bereaved. And my officers see the full toll of that in terms of the officers who have to attend these RTCs, they have to pick up dead people off the road, they have to deal with the families. And we need to do something about this. It is too high. When I came here 2 years ago, I find it staggering. I find it absolutely staggering that there are no fixed speed or average speed cameras in this county, given it is the largest geographical county in the country. That's 6,000 miles of road. And it's easy to paint this as, it's easy to paint this as an issue about speed, and it's not. It's about saving lives and improving road safety. And there are 3 ways you improve road safety. It's the 3 E's: education, and the Mayor talked about what we do in terms of young people trying to target our rural communities. There is only so much that can deliver in this county, because we know, particularly in the summer months, and you look at last year with a really hot summer, and you have people coming in from all over the place, all over the northeast, the northwest, from the Midlands, particularly in the Dales, travelling through the Dales. with the best will in the world, your education is targeted against local people, so it's limited in its effects. Engineering is the big one. And engineering primarily falls to the highways authorities, and I say authorities in plural because it varies depending on the road network. And a fixed speed camera network is not part of enforcement, not there to do people for speeding. It's part of the engineering to stop people speeding. And my view is that, you know, I don't see it in any way, shape or form. And the evidence base is that if you put in a fixed camera, so you don't suddenly see a lot of revenue flowing in, because what it actually does is deter people from speeding. So we know, you know, we've got loads of data around collision hotspots. We know where this happens. Putting in some fixed infrastructure to challenge people driving. It doesn't just have to be cameras. About, you know, we've all seen where you know, if you're driving into an area and it flashes up 30 area on flashing lights and it's red, it's green. If you're on the speed limit, it flashes red. That just because most of the people don't do it deliberately. Most speeding happens when people are just losing concentration, and it reminds people. And if they see, you know, the speed cameras are in bright day glow yellow, day and night, you can see them. It modifies people's behaviour. So I don't see this as, and I will not have it characterised as, you know, I hear all the time it's a cash cow, it's this, that, and the other. It's none of the above. It is about engineering to make our roads safer. And the third E is enforcement. And all we have, you know, in this county at the moment is effectively our road policing team. We do a little bit in neighbourhoods in terms of community speed watch, and we have a relatively small number of mobile speed cameras. Doesn't scratch the surface over a county of 6,000 miles of road, 3,200 square miles. So we're going to have to think about this differently, and it's easy for this to get wrapped up in different debates. It's about saving lives, and 390 people, 390 bereaved families over a 10-year period. And I use that period 10 years because benevolently I'm saying we're probably 10 years behind other places. It's probably more likely 20. You know, I think I've been driving since 1989. I think I first saw speed camera probably about 5 years after that. We are way behind the curve in this, and it's got to change.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions. Chris, I believe you've got a question.
I'll try and speak up. Thank you, Tim, for that eloquent words. My question was actually going to be on speed cameras, but I think you've actually answered that, and the mayor as well mentioned it. And it does say in the report you're working together on that. And I suppose at the end of the day, it's money, isn't it? Somebody's got to pay for those cameras going up. But if you're talking to the two local authorities and developing in the partnership as well, it is a partnership. It's not just a police thing. It's not just highways. It is actually everybody working together and realising the significance. And just as an aside, I'm mayor of Harrogate at the moment. The last couple of years, I've been to an amazing service at Ripon Cathedral, which I think you guys organise. Okay, you intend in numbers, which is really good. That's the Oakleaf service, which is specially to commemorate the lives of people lost in over the last 12 months or whatever. And it's an amazing service, amazing moving service. And I would advise people, if you haven't had a chance to go to that, please do. It's an annual event, and it does bring home what distress is caused and how people's lives changed in an instant on this. So I commend that. I commend your work. Just, I wasn't going to ask this, but I will. 20's plenty, 20 miles per hour zone. There's a national campaign, obviously, for this to be introduced, specifically around school areas. What's the kind of opinion on the significance of that? Will it help contribute? And I suppose the main question was the finally enforcement. How obviously reducing speed does help, but how do we enforce it, particularly when it, you know, those 20 mile per hour signs are there, but if there's not a policeman nearby, how's it enforced other than the cameras?
I'll come on in parts of that, Councillor, if I may. So just so we at the CA, me as the mayor, because that's what I am, we're exploring the funding capabilities and seed funding this work. But what we also need is the two local authorities to be really brave in this space as well and come on board. And when I wrote to every school in North Yorkshire around the importance of road safety and safer streets around schools, and the almost to a school that responded back was they hadn't seen this from North Yorkshire as being a priority. And that concerns me, frankly. We speak to communities and schools and everyone who wants to see this. They will want to see this implemented. So my concerns, if I am being honest, are that it hasn't been a priority. And I think we can see that by the fact that, as the Chief has said, we don't have any cameras and we almost feel like a decade behind. And I know we can go through stats, and as the Chief very eloquently put, this is, over 300 people, these are individuals, and that's not just one person, that's the impact of the wider family and community that's impacted by this as well. So my concerns are that it hasn't been a priority. It certainly is for Joe and I, which is why we are in this position where presenting this and exploring the opportunities for us to seed fund, and actually, because it is going to need some investment, but it is an absolute priority, and getting that engagement back from schools who are very much on board with this as well. Obviously, reducing speeds, I'm not going to get to the operational piece, but I think it's fair to say reducing speeds will reduce those deaths on our roads as well. And again, the feedback we've had from schools is that they want to see that as well. I was in Northstead School in Scarborough quite recently, who had implemented a park and stride system where people parked way away from the school and walked in, and the engagement with the pupils and the families and the teachers, and actually the local communities, because they were seeing there was less cars driving past their streets and areas as well. So it kind of just got almost universal buy-in. We just have to do it. And we can sit here for as long as we want, saying this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. We've actually got to take something from paper and put it into practice. And I'm very concerned, and I believe the Chief's probably in the same space, that this hasn't been done, and it concerns me. Why hasn't it been done? And I think this is very much, without getting to politics of it, should be politics completely to one side. We are literally talking about here reducing deaths on our roads and saving people's lives. This doesn't matter what stripe of colour you wear on a rosette. This is about saving people's lives. So for me and Joe in particular, we know this is a huge priority, and we will be exploring every option we can to make sure that we are making a difference on this. And if it means that us exploring funding options to get it off the ground and working with the whole partnership, which does bring in both authorities, police, fire, and everyone to make sure this happens. Because again, coming back to our partnership working, this is one of those classic examples of it is the partnership working. We all need to be moving in the same direction on this. I think the enforcement bit might be one more for the chief, if I may.
I mean, first, in terms of setting speed limits, it's not an issue for the police. That's an issue for the Highways Authority. But I'll say this without wanting to be quoted on it. Really, I did see something years ago where they said, "Well, why did you set the speed limit at 30?" And I think there's 80% of people who are hit by a car at 30 mile an hour survive. I think at 40 mile an hour, if it's a car versus pedestrian, 80% of people die. So there's always a statistical basis for that. But I'll leave that for others to set. Enforcement's a difficult one because again, within the absence of a fixed speed camera network, effectively you're down to what we can do within our neighbourhood teams, and we do have some speed recording devices that they use periodically. Our roads policing teams, but they tend to be more engaged on the strategic road network. And actually, if you're going to get serious about it, if you're going to put, particularly if you take 20 mile an hour zones, it's beyond me. Why wouldn't you have, at the very least, if you're approaching a 20 mile an hour zone, people don't expect it. One of those signs that, if you're approaching it at 30 miles an hour, it flashes up and says this is a 20 zone, because the majority of people then slow down. People don't want to speed. People don't want to put children at risk. So for me, the focus has got to be on engineering rather than. I do not want a situation where we're seen as just running around and this being a cash cow. I've got no interest in that whatsoever. I want to save lives on the road, and I think that actually having the engineering to prevent that and to discourage people from speed, and the majority of people, as I say, are very compliant around it, and it's often a lapse of concentration, and it's those reminders that do that. And cars are getting better all the time, aren't they? Cars. If anyone's got Google mapping in the cars these days, it soon pings up when the speed limit's about to change and can sound alarms in your cars and all sorts. And it's really how do you build on that in terms of modifying driver behaviour.
Just briefly, Chair, thank you. Just to add, because it's possible that not all members of panel will have read the new road safety strategy that was published at the start of the year. But in the appendix to the strategy, there are some new safety performance indicators that the government is going to be monitoring as part of the delivery of that national strategy. And one of those, just to respond on Councillor Aldred's question around the urban areas, is around looking at speed breaches in urban areas, so particularly focused on 20 and 30 mile an hour roads. So there will be national monitoring of those breaches, which means that actually we are already going to be under scrutiny for our own in terms of the delivery of the national strategy. So we need to get ahead of where we are now, and certainly an investment in a fixed and average camera network will free up some resource in that team to enable some of that other monitoring of speed breaches to take place, which I know is a really high priority, certainly from speaking to the executive member in City of York Council, because they've got significantly more 20 mile an hour zones there, and they are concerned about the monitoring of breaches because they aren't going to introduce necessarily significantly more of those without some assurances around that monitoring. So we do need to get ahead of this, but I do think that the national strategy is going to help us in that, because we are going to have to report on some of these things going forward anyway.
Kevin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I think there's a slight lack of detail in the report, to be quite honest. I'd like to see some timescales and some ambitions in there so we can have a look at that and see where we're going with it. And it might put some oomph behind it with other councils, both North Yorkshire and York, having a look at that and putting it through their system. So although it's a really good start, and I agree with everything that's been said today, I think there needs to be more in this. It's a good plan. It's the first step, I think, and it needs some more detailing plans coming forward. And it's a serious issue that people getting killed in accidents. So I just ask if you've got plans for the next step where we can see some detail. Thank you very much.
The strategy came out in January. Our road safety partnership hasn't been on a stable financial footing. So one of the challenges has been to make sure that we were identifying how we did that, because actually the worst thing that we could do is go backwards. So we have a road safety partnership currently, but the funding for it was legacy funding from some COVID money that had been put in for 3 years. That was going to run out in April. So the priority was making sure that we had some funding for the partnership for the longer term. That now has been identified so that we can put it on that stable financial footing for the long term. And then absolutely we have to look at that. But that was the priority, was to get that partnership established for the longer term. But absolutely we know that we need to go faster. We're all very impatient in this space, and we need our local authority colleagues to come with us.
David?
Thank you, Chairman. Two things really that I'm interested in. One is the table on page 61 of the report. It gives us the fatalities and seriously injured. I would be interested to know how that's broken down, because I'm sure the police have some information on unlicensed drivers, drunk drivers, and just pure idiots. And it would be interesting to know how many of those accidents are actually caused by those things rather than loss of concentration. And I'm not denigrating loss of concentration at all. It happens to me occasionally, I've got to say. But and the other thing I would like to know is the partnership is going to require sustainable funding from April. And what's actually been done to secure it, and where's it coming from?
In terms of the breakdown of the incidents, I believe there's a wider report. I don't know if Joe or Tim has that further image of. Michael might have that on there. In terms of the finance, again, that's what we're exploring with me as the combined authority and the funding that I have, and then working in partnership with the fire and police service as well to have that long-term secure footing. We can't be in a situation where it's just year on year on year. It needs that because it's going to need that long-term investment if we're going to actually shift the dial on this sort of stuff as well.
I'm pleased to hear that. I mean, I do a lot of driving in West Yorkshire. It doesn't worry me about the fixed cameras. I'm quite happy driving with fixed cameras. I question sometimes the 20-mile-an-hour limits, but in large housing schemes and things like that, I support them. And I think North Yorkshire also supports now 20-mile-an-hour limits around schools. So I'm very supportive of that.
I was just going to come back on your data question. So there is additional data from the Road Safety Partnership in their annual report, which does break down this stuff in more detail, which is on their website. But one of the things that we are looking at ensuring that we do put more regularly in the public domain is there is normally quite a long time lag in public data around the killed and serious injury number, which is the big number. For understandable reasons, there is just a time lag in how regularly that is published. But what we can monitor, for example, is the number of times that the police or the fire service or the ambulance service for that matter are called out to road traffic collisions where there are injuries, and that won't necessarily separate out the most serious incidents, but it will give us a picture of what is going on in terms of the demand on the services that are responding to those accidents, because you don't call the police service or the fire service out to a kind of minor bump in a car park, but you probably do call them out to a big collision on a road where there are, wider safety issues. So actually, if we can just make sure that we're putting that information in the public domain, we will. And certainly all that information in terms of those breakdown of demographics and things, actually we have as big a problem in North Yorkshire with young drivers as we do with older drivers. And actually we just need to make sure that this is all aligned as well with the work the Mayor is doing around trying to improve our public transport, because we know that in lots of our rural communities there aren't choices for older drivers necessarily to do something other than retain their driving licence. And so we probably do have more older drivers on our roads just because there isn't a choice, which we do need to look at, which I know the Mayor is focused on through the public transport work that he's doing.
Thank you. I think I've got a question from Caroline and a question from Heather.
Thank you, Chair. It is back to the data in the table 1 in the report, and it is about the significant drop in incidences from 23 to 24. Looking at the fatalities and seriously injured, that's been proportionate, those drops. So it's just what learning has come from any looking into those numbers that you've done and what conclusions you may have drawn.
I can't give you a very scientific response, but I'll give you my the response that I've had when I've asked the same question. Because so much of our regional demand on our roads is driven seasonally, and because we have 40 million odd visitors every year, if we have a terrible summer, we have a lot less visitors into our region and therefore a lot less traffic on the roads. So actually that is probably at least a contributing factor to the big dips. Is if you have a bad summer, we are probably unfortunately going to see less deaths and serious injuries on our roads. Slightly sad fact, but nevertheless not one to really factor in. The average over a longer period is probably the more important factor to look at, and actually whether we can drive that longer term trend downwards rather than looking year to year.
Right, thank you. Some of the, I was going to raise a question, but you answered some of them earlier, which I was going to go back to. Again, you've managed to look at different things. We haven't talked about like traffic black spots where accidents are reoccurring. And I was pleased to hear that you're working obviously with York and North Yorkshire Council, looking at highway safety, and that you had some capital where we could look at that. And then, of course, and the Mayor alluded to the fact that he had funding. I mean, there are some areas where hopefully it is all about funding, isn't it? And one of the issues that not for a long conversation, but such as the A64, which has been going on for a long time. So I was just want to say, I was delighted that you've recognised that, and the question was there, but in your report, Deputy Mayor, you said that you're already engaging with that, and so identifying these areas and the black spots is. Again, I look at the numbers to see exactly how many people are killed in areas, and it's good that you're working together. I thought I'd end on a positive note. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will just add to that, it is funded, but that partnership work is absolutely key. We all need to be aligned on this as well. And must be that is a slight concern of mine that it hasn't always been a priority. And now we've got an opportunity to make it that priority for all partners involved in this to actually make the difference we need to see. So yes, it is funding is one of it, but it's also that will in both authorities to actually make this a priority as well. If that doesn't happen, it's going to be really difficult. So it's making sure that both York and North Yorkshire are very much behind this work as much as anything, because they're going to play a key role in delivering this. We can have all the money in the world, but if they're not at the game to play, then it's not going to happen, unfortunately. And it's very unusual for me to go to a meeting and someone not mention the A64.
Steve?
Thanks, Jess. Sort of antisocial behaviour on highways. In the report that we're encouraged to read from 24, there's a list of car occupant, motorcyclist, pedestrian, etc. Will you be introducing e-bikes and e-scooters, which are becoming the bane of my life, in these lists of people? So I'm quite sure they will be killed and seriously injured very shortly because they're nut jobs.
I was struggling to hear you a bit then, but it was about e-scooters and them being the
Yeah,
scooters.
on the stats for the 24 report, you've got car occupant, motorcyclist, pedestrian. Yeah. Will you be including e-scooters and e-bikes on that, or are they mixing somewhere else? I'm sure in my ward, it's one of the biggest growing problems.
I'm sure that we can in the future. Just a small one on the e-bikes. It is something that we're alive to. We've developed a range of tactics. At the last count, which was I forget which meeting I was at about 4 weeks ago, and I'd asked someone to get me in with 50, we'd seized 54 of them over the course of the past year. They're becoming a big issue, and there's a balance about educating parents about buying kids these things. And I'm not going to get into the specifics. If they're above a certain power level, they're a motor vehicle. They need insuring, and you've got to have the various safety equipment. And we are seizing them, and we'll be in a position. We're going to continue to do that because they are dangerous, and the way that they're being driven is dangerous. And that's not about a lack of concentration. That's about deliberate act, and it needs dealing with, and we will do.
Thank you, members. I think everybody's had the opportunity to ask a question. So all I want to say is thank you for the report. We recognise further work needs to be undertaken in this space, and we'll be supportive of that, and we'll note the report. So thank you. Agenda item 10, work programme. This is just as we took the same report 2 weeks ago, unless members have anything to add. So agenda item 11, any other business. No urgent business has been notified. I just want to thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Chief Constable, and the wider team for attending today and for participating with members in what's been a very good discussion. Agenda item 12, date of next meeting. We did have a further date in the diary for February. We won't be needing that date now because the precept has been passed. So our next meeting is Thursday, the 23rd of April at 10:30, where Steve will be welcoming us to the Selby Civic Centre. Thanks.
Right, I just wanted to, with your leave, Chair, I know that the session that I put on at Force Headquarters last year, I think was well received, and with your leave, if it would be helpful, I would like to organise one again sometime in the next couple of months, if members would be interested.
Chief Constable, it was a first class. I'd underestimated how long it would take, and I had to leave early. So next time I'll allow plenty of time. But we have some new members as well, so we'll get that in the diary. But that was really welcome, and what I recall from it was the enthusiasm of your officers, particularly around neighbourhood policing. So it was a splendid session. So thank you.